Good morning, everyone. This is yet another class. So, I think you have had previous lecture on general introduction to spine injuries. So, this is the continuation of spine series. So, we will be talking on yes, okay. So, today's topic is dorsolumbar spine injury. So, one of the major causes of trauma, dorsolumbar spine injury. So, we'll be talking very briefly. So, spine may be a bit again a confusing topic to you. So, that is cervical spine injury, dorsolumbar spine injury. So, we will again talk about basics only. That is adequate for your level of knowledge. Okay. So, relevant anatomy, we know we have 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 4 coccyx vertebrae that are fused. Sacral and coccygeal vertebrae are fused. And any amount of fracture that occurs in thoracic and lumbar region are called thoracolumbar injuries. So, actually, the junctional area, the region between the thoracolumbar junction, the region around say T10 to L2. So this is the area which is very much prone for injury. So why so? Because the thoracic spine is kyphotic, the lumbar spine is lordotic. So there is sudden change in the curvature of the spine from coming from thoracic to lumbar. Similarly, thoracic spine is relatively less mobile. Because of the ribs attached to it, there is only rotational movement is present. But in lumbar spine, again, the range of motion, especially in forward flexion and lateral bending is much more. Okay, so this creates a stress rising effect. So most of the time, whensoever injury occurs, usually occurs in this thoracolumbar junction region. So the thoracolumbar spine injuries account for 50% of all vertebral fractures. Okay, and 40% of all spinal cord injuries. Now the cause in young population and cause in adult population may be different. In elderly population, usually fall is the most common cause. However, in case of young adults, it is because of road traffic accidents, sports injury, or sometimes fall also. And males are usually affected more than females. This may be due to the males more being involved in outdoor activities, are road traffic accidents or sports activities or outdoor activities. So this may be the cause why male are affected more than female. So etiology is mostly high energy trauma like motor vehicle accidents, fall from height. This is a very much common scenario in our hilly areas, in our village areas. So most of the time in in hilly areas, when a person going into a climbing a tree and fall from it. So in last 4 or 5 years, most of the trauma, around 50 to 60% of, even say 70% of the trauma coming to CMC causing spine injuries are fall from height only. Okay, sports accident, violent injuries such as gunshot injury, very rare nowadays in our scenario. The other cause may be osteoporotic fracture or tumors like multiple myeloma or any condition which cause the underlying bone to weaken. So they may cause osteoporotic or metastatic compression fractures. Okay, so traumatic cause, most common fall from height, followed by road traffic accident. So there are various neurological deficiencies in spinal cord injury. We will talk about that. So first is shock. If any person with spinal cord injury may come with either spinal shock or neurogenic shock, and it is of utmost importance to differentiate between the spinal shock and a neurogenic shock. So remember, neurogenic shock is because of injury disruption of the sympathetic outflow that occurs from T1 to L2. Okay, so there is hypotension, the blood pressure will drop, the heart rate will drop. So this is neurogenic shock. What is spinal shock? Spinal shock is purely because of a injury to the spinal cord. So we know that spinal cord is being controlled by two types of reflex. One is the reflex coming from the higher center, and there is local reflex. So this is a disruption of the local reflex. So normal physiological local reflex of the spinal cord being disrupted is called spinal shock, and it is, remember the term, it is temporary. It usually lasts for about 48 to 70 hours, 72 hours, and very rarely it processes about 1 week. Okay. So how to know whether the person is in spinal shock or not? So there are two reflexes that we do. One is the bulbocavernosus reflex, and another is the anal wing reflex. Okay. So what is bulbocavernosus reflex? This is the reflex pathway. You stretch upon the glans penis or the penile region and put your other finger in the, do a per-rectal examination. So if by doing so, if you feel the contraction of the internal anal sphincter, the bulbocavernosus reflex is present. Okay. Sometimes in cases of females, what we can do, you can simply, instead of glans penis, you can simply stroke around the clitoris. Or if the patient is catheterized, if Foley's catheter is being pulled, has been kept, you can simply torque the Foley's catheter and feel the contraction of the anal sphincter. So if it is present, spinal shock is absent. So in spinal shock, the bulbocavernosus reflex is absent. The anal reflex is the anal wing reflex. What you do, you take a pin and you stroke around the perianal region, and you see the anal sphincter being contracted. So if so, this shows that the anal wing reflex is present, and again the patient is not in spinal shock. Okay. So bulbocavernosus reflex, anal wing reflex, both absent, patient is in spinal shock. Both are present, patient is out of spinal shock. Now, the another neurological deficit now can be complete or incomplete. Remember, it is very till the patient is in phase of spinal shock, you cannot label whether the injury is complete or incomplete, because the neurological level, the sensory or motor deficit may be simply because of spinal shock. So to label that the person has complete neurological injury or incomplete neurological injury, the period of spinal shock must be weaned off. That means bulbocavernosus reflex should be present, anal wing reflex should be present. Then only the level of the neurological examination is called. Okay. So no return of the motor or sensory level below the level of injury after the recovery of the spinal shock. So during the time of the spinal shock, the sensory and motor may be absent because there is temporary physiological damage. So once the patient is overcome from the come out from the level of spinal shock and still he has no motor sensation, then it is called complete neurological deficit. Okay. Another term is incomplete neurological deficit. Again, for this also the bulbocavernosus reflex should come. That means the patient should be out of phase of the spinal shock, and if there is sacral sparing or there is island of spared sensation. So what do we understand by sacral sparing? If we check for the perianal sensation, if perianal sensation is present, or the when you do core rectal examination, the anal sphincter tone is present, or the great toe flexion is present. So this means the presence of perianal sensation or presence of rectal voluntary tone is called sacral sparing. So if motor power is 0, sensory power is also 0, no perianal sensation, no rectal tone, and the patient has come out of the spinal shock, it is complete type of neurological injury. If patient has come out of the spinal shock, the motor power is 0, there is no sensation, but there is perianal sensation is present and rectal tone is present, then it is an example of incomplete neurological deficit. Okay. If the person, the bulbocavernosus reflex is absent, if the patient is still in spinal shock, you cannot say whether it is complete or incomplete. So this was very much important. So it may be a short question for you also in your MBBS examination, right short notion, spinal shock or bulbocavernosus reflex. So this concept should be very much clear. for the terming a patient to be complete or incomplete neurological level. So there are various classification systems. One is Frankel grading, another is ACI grading. You can simply just remember the name, but the classification is not very much different. In Frankel type A, there is no motor sensation, no sensory sensation. In type B, sensory is present, motor is absent. In type 3, sensory present, motor function is present, but not useful. Means you know the MRC grading of muscle power. So muscle power is 2 to 3 or less than 3 out of 5. So it is grade 3. If motor is present, active and useful, that is the motor power is either 4 or 5. Either 4 motor power is 4, it is Frankel grade D, and if normal motor and normal sensory function, Frankel grade E. So A means no motor, no sensory. B is sensory present, motor absent. C is motor present but power either 1, 2 or 3. Motor present, power 4. Motor present, power 5. Okay. Similarly, ACI scale. So type 1 is complete. Complete means no motor, no sensory, no sacral sparing. So in type B, it is again sensory intact, no motor function. In type C, it is more than 50% of the muscles have grade 3. In type 4, it is 50% have power more than grade 3. In type 5, there is normal motor and sensory function. So this both seems to almost similar. The only thing difference between the Frankel and an ACI grade is the ACI impairment scale also considers bowel and bladder impairment. Okay, so that is the sensory level S2, S3, S4. The root level S2, S3, S4 is taken into consideration in cases in the classification by ACI scale, whereas in case of Frankel, it does not take into consideration that the perineal sensation or bowel and bladder function. Okay, so that's the only difference between the Frankel grading and ACI grading. So before moving on to proper dorsal-lumbar injury, so it is important to know that there is 3 columns in spine that is given by Danish. So it is divided into anterior column, middle column, and the posterior column. So anterior column consists of anterior half of this whole is the vertebral body. So anterior half of the vertebral body, anterior part of the intervertebral disc, and in anteriorly we have anterior longitudinal ligament. So ALL, anterior longitudinal ligament, anterior half of vertebral body, and anterior half of the disc. This constitutes the anterior column. Middle column is constituted by the posterior half of the vertebral body, posterior half of the disc, and posterior longitudinal ligament. Okay, so in posterior column we have ligamentum flavum, the pedicle, the lamina, the spinous process, the transverse process, the superior articular process, the inferior articular process. So all the posterior elements lying behind the body, and there is supraspinous ligament and the interspinous ligament and ligamentum flavum. These all are constituted by the posterior column. So roughly anterior half is anterior column, middle half of the body is middle column, and posterior to middle vertebral body is posterior column. So what are the different types of forces that can cause different types of injury that can cause spinal injury? So it can be either due to axial or lateral compression. For example, a person falls on forehead or feet, so there will be compression along the vertebral column. So this is an example of compression injury. Other is flexion. If a person falls in this scenario, so there will be flexion type of injury that will cause the damage to the vertebral column. Okay, there can be flexion and rotation. So flexion also, and the body twist also. Flexion rotation injury, or there can be flexion distraction injury. For example, in seat belt injury. So if a person is traveling in a driver or a sitting on the front seat having a seat belt, so the seat belt will usually cause flexion distraction type of injury, or it can, or the other form of injury is extension. So these are the various mechanisms by which a person can get spinal injury. Okay, again, based upon the middle column. So whether the middle column fails or not. So McAfee et al. Has given different classification system of the vertebral column fractures. Okay, so wedge compression fracture means wedge compression, stable burst, unstable burst, chance, flexure destruction, and transmission. So in wedge compression, only the anterior column fails. The middle column is intact, the posterior column is intact. Okay. In burst fracture, middle column also fails. Wedge compression, anterior column fails. In burst fracture, anterior column and middle column fail. So difference between the and the, again the burst fracture can be either stable or unstable. So if posterior column is intact, it is stable type of burst. If anterior column, middle column, and posterior column also all fail in compression, it is unstable type of burst. Okay, so this wedge and burst are example of compression injury. So last three are a combination of compression, rotation, and distraction injuries. So in all these three, all anterior column, middle column, and posterior column fail. So we will try to see them in subsequent slides. So compression fracture. So a person falling from a height lands upon the feet, or a person falling from a height lands upon his neck or head. So the vertebra will be compressed from above and from behind. So it will cause the anterior column will fail in compression. The middle column and the posterior column is intact. Okay. So results from anterior or lateral flexion, failure of the anterior column. The middle column is intact. There can be partial column failure of the posterior column, but middle column is usually intact, and there is usually no neurological deficit. So the person will be either Frankel E or ACR grade E. Okay, the other type is burst fracture. Again, compression injury, but in this there is additionally failure of middle column. So anterior column also fails, the middle column also fails. So if you see on the axial section, so this posterior half, the middle column, because beyond that is the spinal column. So in which the spinal canal, in which the spinal cord passes. So this fragment when comes posteriorly, it will compress upon the spinal cord, and usually there will be neurological injury. Okay, so in vertebral compression fracture, in type wedge compression, only this part is damaged, so there will be usually no neurological deficit because the middle column is usually intact and it does not injure the spinal cord. But in case of burst fracture, the anterior column fails, the middle column fails, and the middle column usually goes back into the posteriorly into the spinal canal and causes neurological injury. Okay, the chance injury. Chance fracture is the anterior column, the middle column, and the posterior column all fail in tension, distraction type of force. So there will be a anterior to the vertebral body is the anterior longitudinal ligament. So there will be the hinge to flex to go somewhere. There should be somewhere hinge for the fulcrum. So this point is the hinge. So the anterior longitudinal ligament acts as the hinge, and this part goes up, this part goes down. So all the three columns fail, distraction injury, hinging upon the anterior longitudinal ligament, and the posterior ligamentous complex. This whole complex is disrupted, and usually there will be neurological deficit because even the middle column and the posterior column all have failed. Okay. So what is posterior ligamentous complex? So it consists of ligamentum flavum here. So the facet joint, the inferior articular process and the superior articular process from the facet joint, and so the capsule of the facet joint. In between the two spinous process, there is interspinous ligament, and above the posterior to the spinous process, there is supraspinous ligament. So ligamentum flavum, the facet joint, the interspinous ligament, and the supraspinous ligament all constitute the posterior ligamentous complex, and this posterior ligamentous complex is disrupted in chance fracture. So now chance fracture can again be bony variant or a ligamentous variant. So this injury can go through bone. So this is vertebral body, this is bone. Okay. So this is spinous process, this is bone. The fracture is occurring along the bone. So this is a purely bony type of injury. Similarly, it can go along the soft tissue, means this is intervertebral disc. The bone is normal, the bone is intact, the vertebral body is intact, the posterior column is intact, but it has gone through the intervertebral disc and to the interspinous ligament and the posterior ligamentous complex. So this is an example of ligamentous or discal type of chance injury. And the other is the combination of both. So the fracture pattern may run like this. It can run to the bony and it can go into ligamentous, or it can go from intervertebral disc and it can go posterior towards the spinal process or pedicle or lamina. So this will be an example of part bony and part ligamentous type of chance fracture. And remember, because we always know that bone to bone healing is not bone fracture heals. So purely if the chance fracture is purely bony, it has got best amount of healing. So usually sometimes if the neurological deficit is not present, we can manage it conservatively. If it is ligamentous, it is usually does not heal because soft tissue do not heal by themselves. The disc does not heal or the ligaments do not heal by themselves, and they usually require some amount of fixation. Otherwise, the spine will be very much stable. In part bony and part ligamentous, obviously there will be some amount where there is bony involvement. They will heal, and the ligamentous part of the injury is not going to heal. The other is flexion distraction injury. Again, the chance fracture and flexion distraction injury are almost similar. They usually occur in case of seat belt type of injuries. Okay, in the chance fracture, the hinge was at the anterior longitudinal ligament. However, in case of flexion distraction injury, the hinge is at the anterior column. So in chance fracture, all the anterior column, the middle column and the posterior column, they are distracted. They all fail in distraction. In flexion distraction, so the anterior column fails in compression because there is flexion. The middle column and the posterior column fail in distraction, and it is again unstable because all the three columns have been disrupted. Another is translation. So if in the chance fracture and the flexion distraction injury, the anterior column, there was something preventing the translation of vertebra anteriorly. So if the anterior longitudinal ligament also fails, if one vertebra translates upon the another vertebra, it is called translation type of injury, and it is again a more severe type of injury. And the final one is flexion dislocation type of injury. Again, all the three columns fail. In the fracture fragment, one vertebra moves anteriorly over the anterior vertebra. So again, it is also the seat belt type of injury, but in this case, the anterior hinge is disrupted. Now, there can be 2 or 3 variants of flexion dislocation, fracture dislocation. It can be flexion and rotation, flexion and distraction, or shear type. So this all classification might be confusing to you. Remember, you should know there are vertebral column fractures fail depending upon the mechanism of injury. So one simplest form is the wedge compression fracture. There is compression injury, anterior column fails, middle column is intact, posterior column is intact. Okay. The other one is the burst. Anterior column fails, middle column also fails. Again, this is a compression type of injury. If the posterior column also fails, it is unstable burst. If only anterior and medial column fail but posterior column is intact, this is stable type of burst. On all the other type, the chance, the flexion distraction, or the translation injury, all the 3 columns fail in distraction. Okay, so at least try to remember this much point from this classification system. Now, once we have talked whether the spine is stable or unstable, so what determines whether the spinal injury is stable or not? Okay, so if by normal physiological loading, for example, what do we mean by normal physiological standing? By standing, by walking. If there are chances of further neurological damage, if there is chronic pain, if the deformity is going to increase, it is an unstable type of injury. Okay. So if the anterior column and the middle column is disrupted, if 2 columns are disrupted, it is usually an unstable type of injury. If the middle column is intact, the key column in the among the anterior, middle, and posterior column, the key column is the middle column. So if the middle column is intact, the fracture is usually stable. If the middle column is broken or disrupted, the fracture is usually unstable. So how will the patient present to you? The patient will present to you with a history of trauma, say rotoreflex accident or fall from height or sports injury. And on examination, there will be pain, there may be loss of function, the patient may be unable to move both the lower limbs, there will be sensory loss, motor loss, and sometimes there can be bowel and bladder involvement also. So detailed history should be taken. So what was the type of injury? So what was it, a low velocity injury or a high velocity injury? What was the mechanism of injury? So that will determine what type of fracture, what will be the prognosis of the patient. If there is neurological deficit, you should note from what is the time of the onset of the neurological deficit, and whether the deficit is increasing, decreasing, or constant. Okay, so that all should be noted. So also the patient may have other non-spinal injuries other from the spinal cord, for example head injuries, chest injuries, and long bone fractures. So that also should be taken into consideration while managing the patient as a whole. On inspection and palpation, what we will see? We will look for swellings, whether there is tenderness or not, whether there is any bruise, laceration, or ecchymosis over the skin, whether there is an open injury, whether there is any hematoma formation, or whether there is spinal malalignment. For example, all the spinous process, when we palpate posteriorly, we are able to palpate the spinous process. So all the spinal process must be aligned in same line. If they are not aligned, probably there is the spinal malalignment, and there is translation type of injury that we can take into think in the back of your mind. Okay, so whenever we are examining the patient, or whenever we are trying to transfer the patient for X-ray or whatsoever, you should always, probably this might have been taught to you. So log roll method is a must. log roll भनेको काठको टुक्रा. सो फर एक्जाम्पल एउटा ठुलो काठको मुढालाई हटाउनलाई एउटा मान्छे तीनतिरबाट मान्छे लाग्नु पर्यो भने जस्तै. सो there should be at least 3, ideally 4 people in log roll method. The one who is standing on towards the head, who is taking care of the head and neck, he is the captain of the team. He should say when to move. 1, 2, 3, move. Pule bhaneपछि the other person will look after the trunk, and other will look after the limb. The head and neck, the trunk and the limb all should go in same way, like the log is being rolled. Okay, so this will be taken into consideration while doing the log roll examination, while examining the patient. So how do we evaluate the neurological level? We have a different ACI scoring system or Frankel scoring system. You can follow anyone, and you should try to label whether the neurological injury is either deficit is either complete or incomplete. But remember, before labeling to it to be complete or incomplete, the patient should be out of spinal shock. Okay. When do we call complete? There is flaccid paralysis and total loss of sensory and motor function. There is no sacral sparing. So this is then we call it the complete loss. Incomplete, it may be of different types. Only the anterior cord can be damaged, the anterior cord syndrome, the central cord syndrome, the posterior cord syndrome, Brown-Sequard syndrome, or Cauda-Equina syndrome. So these are the different examples of incomplete injury. So how we look for dermatomal testing? If you go through your textbook, there will be a pictorial image showing different dermatomal levels. So you should compare on the both sides whether the sensation is intact or not. Okay. Similarly, in motor, we have key muscles. We have five key muscles in upper limb, 5 key muscles in lower limb. So C5 is elbow flexion, C6 is wrist extensor, C7 is elbow extensor, C8 is finger flexor, T1 is little finger abductor. Similarly, L2 is hip flexor, L3 is knee extensor, L4 is ankle dorsiflexor, L5 is long toe, great toe extensor, and S1 is ankle plantar flexor. So you should grade all these muscles based upon the MRC scale of 0 to 5. Okay, now after clinical evaluation, we will go for investigations. We will ask for plain X-rays, anterior, posterior, and lateral view. And yes, required CT and MRI may be required. Okay. So what we look in the anterior posterior view, we look for the alignment of the vertebral body. So if all the vertebral body are aligned or not, we will look if there is decrease in the height. So in this vertebra, both the left side and the right side are equal, but in this involved vertebral level, this height is less as compared to this height. So there can be overall compression of the vertebral height, or the vertebral height may be compressed only on one side. Similarly, what we can do, we can this thing is the pedicle. This is the pedicle. We measure the distance between the two pedicles. So distance between the two pedicle of a vertebra should be the average of this vertebra and this vertebra. For example, if this is 12 millimeter, if this is 14 millimeter, it should be something around 12 and 14. That is that is 30 millimeter. If it is more, then there is the medial column is disrupted. So again, this is the spinous process. We can again see for the alignment of the spinous process. We can look for the distance between the spinous process and the pedicle. So this will say whether the medial column is gone or not. So for example, in this also, this distance should be equidistant. This distance should be equidistant. Okay. So that's what we look in the AP view. Similarly, in lateral view, we look for the alignment of the anterior vertebral body and alignment of the posterior vertebral body. For example, this is broken here. So by this you can know that this vertebra is fractured and the medial column is also disrupted. Okay. Similarly, in lateral view, we can know how much is the compression of the, how much is the reduction of the vertebral height, or whether there is reduction in the intervertebral space. So these all are things can be seen in the lateral view. CT scan is usually helpful to know whether there is canal compromise or not. For example, in the axial cut, so this hole was the spinal canal. So this fracture fragment has come enclosed in the vertebral canal. So obviously the person will have spinal cord injury. Okay. Similarly, 3D or 2D imaging, we can know the anterior column is fractured, the posterior column is fractured. It has the posterior column is fractured, the medial column is fractured, and it has gone posteriorly in the spinal canal. So MRI, if there is presence of neurological deficit, we should do an MRI also, so that we can know whether there is cord injury, say cord edema or cord compression. It may be because of the disc or fracture fragment or the epidural hematoma. Also, the MRI will tell you about the soft tissue, the posterior ligamentous complex structure. For example, the supraspinous or the interspinous ligaments, whether they are disrupted or not, that will be depicted by the MRI image. So after in investigation, we now plan for treatment. So we can go for non-operative, minimally invasive, or operative treatment. So when non-operative, when there is only wedge compression fracture is stable, or a bony chance fracture, we can go for non-operative treatment. So non-operative treatment is bed rest if the patient pain subsides. It usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. Then we give some form of brace. For example, TLSO, thoracolumbosacral orthosis, or anterior spine hyperextension brace. We give some type of brace and mobilize the patient. Okay. The minimally invasive is if the vertebra is fractured, we can simply inject the bone cement. So it is an example of vertebroplasty. So injecting a bone cement within the fractured vertebra. So what it will do? It will prevent further collapse of the vertebral body because there is bone cement, and it will cause relief of the pain also. And another thing that can be done is we pass an instrument. So in vertebroplasty, simply the bone cement was injected here. Now first, before injecting the cement, we dilate the vertebra. So it means the vertebral height will be restored, and then we inject the cement. Okay. So these are the forms of minimally invasive treatment, usually done in case of wedge compression type of fractures. But sometimes we need operative treatment in unstable fractures. If there is neurological deficit, or relative indication may be when there is kyphotic deformity of more than 30%, when there is translation of more than 10 degrees, when there is loss of the vertebral height. In short, if the fracture is of unstable type and if there is neurological deficit, we may want to go for surgery. So in surgery, what we will do, we will decompress the spinal cord. So something, either the disc or the fracture fragment or the hematoma, something is compressing over the spinal cord. So we are trying to decompress the spinal cord. So it can be done indirectly by putting a pedicle screw and distracting. So it is an indirect method. We do not look into the spinal cord. Another is the direct type of decompression. We look into the spinal cord and decompress the spinal cord. So this is an example of pedicle screw being placed, indirect decompression. This is an example of direct. So if you see carefully, this amount, this is the cord, this is the spinal cord. The lamina has been removed, the spinal process has been removed to decompress the spinal canal. Okay. So after that, we have to take the patient into rehab. Rehab part is also very much important for the well functioning of the patient. So there can be some complications of thoracolumbar injuries. The most common is the persistent pain. Either it may be because of after surgery or without surgery, or there can be, if not surgery is done, there can be progressive kyphotic deformity, progressive neurological deformity, or sometimes post-traumatic syringomyelia means there will be some type of cyst formation within the spinal cord. So take up message is from this class is when you are transferring the patient or you are examining the patient, be very much careful. Do the examination after lobe rolling movement only. You look whether the patient is in spinal shock or not. For that you can do bulbocavernosus reflex. You look whether the bladder and bladder is involved or not, perianal sensation is intact or not, and you do the complete neurological examination, both sensory and motor. If the patient is comes with cauda equina syndrome, it is a surgical emergency. You have to take the patient immediately to the OT, and you should have some idea what to look for in the plane X-rays, in anteroposterior view, what to look, in lateral view, what to look, how to look between the interpedicular distance. That's all things should come into your mind. Okay. This is for today's lecture. So I think we have